Billionaire sees a dying woman clutching his photo in a hospital, then learns she's his first love who saved his life. Gabriel Knight, billionaire founder of Knight Pharmaceuticals, stood stiffly in the bustling hallway of St. Jude's Charity Hospital. He wasn't uncomfortable in hospitals, per se. His company developed life-saving drugs, after all. But the raw, unfiltered humanity of a charity hospital, the palpable sense of desperation and hope intertwined, always unsettled him. He preferred the sterile, controlled environment of his corporate headquarters or his lavish penthouse overlooking Central Park. Gabriel was a man of sharp angles and precise movements. His silver hair was impeccably styled, his suit bespoke and tailored, his gaze direct and assessing. He had built his empire on a combination of scientific brilliance, relentless drive, and a ruthless business acumen. He was respected, feared, and admired, but rarely truly known. He was at St. Jude's today as part of his annual philanthropic obligation. Knight Pharmaceuticals funded a significant portion of the hospital's operating budget, and Gabriel made a point of making a personal appearance once a year, a carefully orchestrated display of corporate social responsibility. He shook hands with doctors, smiled politely at nurses, and made a brief, well-rehearsed speech about the importance of accessible health care. As he was being escorted through the emergency room, a scene caught his eye. In a curtained-off cubicle, a woman lay on a gurney, her face gaunt and pale, her breathing shallow and labored. She was clearly nearing the end. A nurse was attending to her, her expression a mixture of professional concern and quiet sadness. What drew Gabriel's attention was not the woman herself, but something she was clutching in her hand. It was a photograph, old and tattered, held so tightly that her knuckles were white. The angle made it difficult to see the image clearly, but Gabriel caught a glimpse of a young man's face, a face that stirred a faint, almost forgotten memory. He paused, his carefully planned itinerary momentarily forgotten. He felt a strange pull, an inexplicable urge to see the photograph more clearly. He gestured to his assistant, a young, efficient woman named Sarah. "Sarah, wait here a moment," he said, his voice low. He approached the cubicle, his footsteps muffled by the hospital's linoleum floor. The nurse looked up, startled by his sudden appearance. "Mr. Knight," she said, her voice respectful but questioning. "Is there something I can help you with?" Gabriel hesitated, feeling a flicker of embarrassment. He was intruding, breaking his own carefully constructed facade of detached philanthropy. But the pull of the photograph was too strong to ignore. I just noticed the woman," he said, his voice slightly hesitant. "She seems to be holding a photograph. Could I see it?" The nurse looked at him with a mixture of surprise and pity. She glanced at the dying woman, then back at Gabriel. "Of course, Mr. Knight," she said softly. "She's been holding it ever since she was brought in. We haven't been able to get her to let go." The nurse gently, carefully, pried the photograph from the woman's weakening grip. She handed it to Gabriel, her eyes filled with a quiet sadness. Gabriel took the photograph, his fingers trembling slightly. He looked down at the faded image, and the world around him seemed to fade away. The photograph was small, about the size of a playing card, its edges worn and frayed. The colors had faded with time, giving the image a soft, almost dreamlike quality. It showed two young people, a boy and a girl, standing on a train platform, their arms around each other, their faces beaming with youthful joy. At first, Gabriel focused on the boy. He was struck by a vague sense of familiarity, a feeling that he had seen this face before, somewhere in the distant past. The boy was tall and lanky, with a mop of unruly dark hair and bright, intelligent eyes. He wore a worn leather jacket and a slightly rebellious smirk. It was a face full of youthful confidence and a hint of mischief. Gabriel stared at the photo, his mind racing, trying to place the face, to connect it to a specific memory. He felt a strange stirring in his chest, a flicker of something he hadn't felt in decades, a sense of longing, of nostalgia for a time long past. Then, his gaze shifted to the girl, and the world stopped. The girl was petite, with a cascade of auburn hair that framed a face of delicate beauty. Her eyes, even in the faded photograph, sparkled with life and laughter. She wore a simple, floral print dress, and her smile was radiant, illuminating the entire image. Recognition slammed into Gabriel with the force of a physical blow. He staggered back, his hand flying to his chest, as if to ward off the impact. It couldn't be. It was impossible. But it was her. Anna. The name echoed in his mind, a whisper from the past, a ghost resurrected by the faded image in his hand. Anna. His first love, the girl who had vanished from his life 30 years ago, leaving a void that he had never been able to fill. Memories flooded his mind, vivid and intense, as if no time had passed. He remembered the summer they had met, the stolen kisses, the whispered promises, the shared dreams of a future together. He remembered her laughter, her kindness, her unwavering spirit. He remembered the train tracks. The memory hit him with a jolt, a sharp, painful reminder of the event that had changed their lives forever. He had been reckless, foolish, showing off for her. He had been standing on the tracks, daring a train to approach, a stupid, adolescent game of chicken. He had miscalculated. The train had come faster than he expected. He had frozen, paralyzed by fear. And then, Anna had pushed him, shoving him off the tracks with a strength he hadn't known she possessed. He had landed hard, scraping his knees and elbows, but he was alive. He had looked up, expecting to see Anna beside him, laughing at his foolishness. But she wasn't there. The train had roared past, a blur of metal and noise. And when it was gone, Anna was gone too. He had searched for her, frantically, desperately. He had called her name until his voice was hoarse. But she had vanished. He never saw her again. Until now. Gabriel stared at the photograph, his hands trembling, his eyes filled with tears. The gaunt, dying woman in the hospital bed, it was Anna. The girl he had loved, the girl who had saved his life, the girl who had disappeared without a trace. He felt a wave of grief wash over him, a profound sense of loss that he had suppressed for decades. He had moved on with his life, built his empire, achieved his success. But he had never forgotten her. He had always wondered what had happened to her, why she had vanished. And now, here she was, dying in a charity hospital, clutching a photograph of their youthful selves. The irony was bitter, the injustice overwhelming. He had to see her. He had to talk to her. He had to know what had happened. Gabriel stumbled back towards the cubicle, the photograph clutched tightly in his hand. He felt disoriented, his carefully constructed world tilting on its axis. The nurse looked at him with concern, her eyes questioning. "Mr. Knight, are you all right?" she asked. Gabriel didn't answer. He pushed past her, his gaze fixed on the woman lying on the gurney. He reached her bedside, his heart pounding in his chest. "Anna," he whispered, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Anna, it's me. It's Gabriel." The woman's eyelids fluttered, but she didn't open her eyes. She was barely conscious, her breathing shallow and irregular. Gabriel gently took her hand, his fingers wrapping around her frail, cold fingers. Her skin felt papery thin, her bones fragile beneath his touch. He felt a surge of protectiveness, a desperate urge to shield her from further pain. "Anna, can you hear me?" he asked, his voice louder this time. "It's Gabriel, from the train tracks. Remember?" A faint flicker of recognition crossed her face. Her lips moved, forming a silent word. Gabriel leaned closer, straining to hear. "Gabriel," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Tears welled up in Gabriel's eyes. He had found her. After all these years, he had found her. But it was too late. She was dying. "Yes, Anna, it's me," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm here. I'm here with you." He wanted to ask her 1,000 questions. He wanted to know what had happened to her, why she had disappeared, where she had been all these years. But he knew he couldn't. She was too weak. He had to be patient. He sat down on a small stool beside the bed, still holding her hand. He watched her, his heart aching with a mixture of grief, regret, and a strange, unfamiliar sense of hope. The nurse approached him. her expression filled with a mixture of compassion and professional concern. "Mr. Knight," she said softly, "I understand this must be a shock, but she's very weak. You shouldn't expect too much." Gabriel nodded, his gaze fixed on Anna's face. He knew the nurse was right. He had to be realistic, but he couldn't help but hope. He had found her after all these years. Maybe, just maybe, there's still a chance. He squeezed Anna's hand, a silent promise to stay by her side, to be with her until the end. He had lost her once. He wouldn't lose her again, not without knowing the truth, not without telling her how much she had meant to him. The minutes ticked by, slow and agonizing. The emergency room bustled around them, a cacophony of sounds and activity. But in the small, curtained-off cubicle, time seemed to stand still. Gabriel sat there, holding Anna's hand, lost in a sea of memories and regrets, waiting for her to speak, to reveal the secrets of the past. A low moan escaped Anna's lips, drawing Gabriel's attention back to the present. Her eyes fluttered open, focusing on him with a surprising clarity. "Gabriel," she whispered, her voice stronger than before, but still frail. You came." "I'm here, Anna," Gabriel said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'm here." He leaned closer, his hand tightening around hers. Anna's gaze drifted to the photograph, still clutched in Gabriel's other hand. A faint smile touched her lips. You remember?" she whispered. "Of course, I remember," Gabriel said. "How could I ever forget? You saved my life, Anna." A shadow of pain crossed her face. I didn't want you to know," she whispered, her voice trailing off. "Know what, Anna?" Gabriel asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. "What didn't you want me to know?" Anna took a shallow, ragged breath. The train," she whispered. I was hurt, badly hurt." Gabriel's heart clenched. He remembered the train roaring past, the terrifying blur of metal. He had assumed she had escaped unharmed, that she had simply vanished. He had never considered the possibility that she had been injured. "Hurt?" he asked, his voice filled with a sudden, sharp fear. "How badly hurt, Anna?" Anna closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her strength. My legs," she whispered. I couldn't walk." Gabriel felt a cold wave of shock wash over him. She had been injured, seriously injured, and he had never known. He had spent 30 years wondering what had happened to her, never imagining the pain and suffering she had endured. "And I had no idea," he said, his voice trembling. "I searched for you. I called your name, but you were gone." A faint, sad smile touched her lips. I hid," she whispered. "I didn't want you to see me like that." "But why, Anna?" Gabriel asked, his voice filled with anguish. "Why didn't you let me help you?" Anna's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of love, regret, and a deep, abiding sadness. I wanted you to live your life, Gabriel," she whispered. "To be happy, successful. I didn't want to be a burden." Tears streamed down Gabriel's face. He couldn't comprehend the magnitude of her sacrifice. She had saved his life, suffered grievous injuries, and then disappeared, all to protect him, to allow him to live his life without the burden of her disability. "Anna, you could never have been a burden," he said, his voice choked with emotion. You are the love of my life." Anna's eyes widened slightly, a flicker of surprise crossing her face. She had never known. He had never told her. A cough racked her body, a harsh, painful sound that tore at Gabriel's heart. The nurse rushed to her side, adjusting her oxygen mask. "Mr. Knight," the nurse said, her voice urgent. "She needs to rest. You need to leave." Gabriel knew the nurse was right, but he couldn't bear to leave Anna. Not now. Not when he had just found her. Not when he had so much to say. "Just a few more minutes," he pleaded. "Please." The nurse hesitated, then nodded, her eyes filled with compassion. Gabriel turned back to Anna, his gaze locked on hers. "Anna," he said, his voice low and intense. "I never stopped loving you. I never forgot you. I need to know what happened. I need to know everything." Anna's eyes held his, a silent promise in their depths. She would tell him. She would tell him everything. But she needed time. And time, Gabriel knew, was the one thing she didn't have. The nurse's warning had been prescient. Anna's brief moment of lucidity faded, her eyes closing, her breathing becoming shallow and labored once more. The nurse gently but firmly ushered Gabriel out of the cubicle, her face etched with concern. "Mr. Knight, she's very weak," the nurse said. "She needs to rest. I'll call Dr. Ramirez, the attending physician. He can explain her condition to you." Gabriel felt a surge of frustration, a desperate need to be with Anna, to hold her hand, to hear her voice. But he knew he had to be patient, to respect the medical professional's judgment. He paced restlessly in the hallway, his mind racing, his heart aching. He felt helpless, overwhelmed by the sudden, unexpected turn of events. He had come to the hospital for a routine philanthropic visit, and now he was facing the imminent death of the woman he had loved, the woman who had saved his life. After what seemed like an eternity, a doctor approached him. Dr. Ramirez was a middle-aged man with tired eyes and a kind, compassionate demeanor. "Mr. Knight," Dr. Ramirez said, extending his hand. "I'm Dr. Ramirez. I've been overseeing MS. Miller's care." Gabriel shook his hand, his grip tight. "Doctor, please tell me," he said, his voice urgent. "What's wrong with her? What happened?" Dr. Ramirez led Gabriel to a small, quiet waiting area, away from the bustle of the emergency room. They sat down, and the doctor began to explain, his voice calm and measured. "MS. Miller has been battling a very aggressive form of cancer," Dr. Ramirez said. "It's metastasized, spread throughout her body. We've done everything we can, but I'm afraid there's nothing more we can do." Gabriel felt a cold fist clench around his heart. Cancer. It was a cruel, insidious disease, one that his own company had spent billions of dollars trying to combat. And now, it was stealing Anna from him, just when he had finally found her. "But the train accident," Gabriel said, his voice hesitant. She said she was injured. Her legs." Dr. Ramirez nodded. "Yes, that's in her medical history," he said. "She suffered severe spinal injuries in the accident, resulting in paraplegia. She's been confined to a wheelchair for many years." "But the cancer, is it related to the accident?" Gabriel asked, grasping at straws, hoping for some explanation, some connection that would make sense of this tragedy. Dr. Ramirez shook his head. "No, Mr. Knight," he said. "The cancer is unrelated to the accident. It's just a cruel coincidence, a terrible twist of fate." Gabriel felt a wave of despair wash over him. There was no logical explanation, no underlying cause he could fight against. It was just life, unfair, unpredictable, and ultimately uncontrollable. How long does she have?" Gabriel asked, his voice barely a whisper. Dr. Ramirez looked at him with compassion. "It's difficult to say precisely," he said, "but it could be hours, maybe a day or two at most. She's very weak." Gabriel nodded, his eyes filled with tears. He had to make the most of the time he had left with Anna. He had to tell her how much he loved her, how much he had always loved her. Can I see her?" he asked. Dr. Ramirez nodded. "Of course," he said, "but please keep it brief. She needs to rest." Gabriel stood up, his legs feeling heavy, his heart pounding in his chest. He walked back towards Anna's cubicle, his mind numb with grief, his soul aching with a pain he had never known before. He had found her, only to lose her again. But this time he would be there. He would be with her until the end. Gabriel re-entered the cubicle, his heart heavy with sorrow. Anna lay still, her eyes closed, her breathing shallow. He gently took her hand, his fingers interlacing with hers. He sat beside her, watching her, waiting for another moment of lucidity, another chance to connect with the woman he had lost and miraculously found again. After a long silence, Anna's eyes fluttered open. She looked at Gabriel, a faint smile touching her lips. "Gabriel," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. "I'm here, Anna," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "I'm here. You need to know," she whispered, struggling to speak. "About after." Gabriel leaned closer, his hand tightening around hers. "Tell me, Anna," he said. "Tell me everything." Anna took a deep, shuddering breath, gathering her strength. And then, in a halting, whispered voice, she began to tell her story, the story of her life after the train tracks, the story of her sacrifice. After the train, she began, her voice fading in and out. I woke up in a hospital. They told me I would never walk again." Gabriel felt a fresh wave of grief wash over him, imagining the young, vibrant Anna confined to a wheelchair, her dreams shattered. I was so scared, Gabriel," she whispered. "So alone. My family, they couldn't cope. They put me in a home." Gabriel's heart ached at the thought of Anna, abandoned and alone, struggling to adjust to her new reality. He wanted to rage against the injustice of it all, but he remained silent, listening intently. I learned to live with it," she continued, her voice growing weaker. "I found a small apartment. I got a job as a janitor. It wasn't much, but it was enough." A janitor. The woman who had dreamed of being a teacher, a woman of intelligence and spirit, reduced to cleaning floors for a living. The unfairness of it was almost unbearable. But there was something else. Anna whispered, her eyes searching his. "Something I never told you." Gabriel held his breath, anticipating the revelation, a knot of fear tightening in his stomach. I was pregnant, Gabriel," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "With your child." The words hit Gabriel like a physical blow. He stared at her, his mind reeling, unable to comprehend the magnitude of what she had just revealed. He had a child, a son or daughter he had never known. "A child?" he whispered, his voice trembling. You have my child?" Anna nodded, a single tear rolling down her cheek. "A son," she whispered. "His name is Michael." Gabriel felt a torrent of emotions flood through him. Shock, disbelief, joy, and an overwhelming sense of guilt. He had a son he had never known, a son who had grown up without a father. Why didn't you tell me, Anna?" he asked, his voice choked with emotion. Anna's eyes met his, filled with a mixture of love and regret. I was afraid, Gabriel," she whispered. "Afraid of disrupting your life. Afraid of your family. I thought it was better for you, for him, if you didn't know." She had sacrificed everything. Her own happiness, her own dreams, the chance to have a family with the man she loved, all for the sake of her child, for the sake of his future. "Anna, you should have told me," Gabriel said, his voice raw with emotion. I would have been there for you, for both of you." "I know," she whispered, a faint smile touching her lips. "But I made my choice, and I never regretted saving you." Her voice faded, her eyes closing. Gabriel knew that her time was running out. He had to find his son. He had to make amends for the lost years, for the life Anna had sacrificed. "Anna, I promise you," he said, his voice firm and determined. "I will find Michael. I will take care of him. I will honor your memory." A faint, peaceful smile spread across Anna's face. She squeezed his hand weakly, a final gesture of love and trust. And then, her grip loosened, her breathing stopped, and she was gone. The hours following Anna's death were a blur of grief and activity for Gabriel. He made the necessary arrangements, his efficient assistant, Sarah, handling the logistics with quiet competence. But beneath the surface of his businesslike demeanor, Gabriel was reeling from the emotional impact of Anna's revelation. He had a son, a 30-year-old son he had never known. The thought was both exhilarating and terrifying. He felt a surge of paternal love, a fierce desire to connect with this unknown child, to make up for lost time. But he also felt a deep sense of guilt, a crushing weight of responsibility for the life Anna had lived, the sacrifices she had made. He knew he had to find Michael, but he didn't know where to start. Anna had given him a name, but that was all. He had no address, no phone number, no other information. He turned to the hospital staff for help. He spoke to Dr. Ramirez, to the nurses who had cared for Anna, even to the social worker assigned to her case. He explained the situation, his voice raw with emotion, his desperation palpable. The hospital staff, moved by his story and by Anna's quiet dignity, were eager to assist. They searched through Anna's records, looking for any clue, any information that might lead him to his son. Finally, the social worker, a kind, compassionate woman named Maria, found something. Tucked away in Anna's file was an old address, a small apartment in a working-class neighborhood on the outskirts of the city. It was a long shot, but it was the only lead they had. "Mr. Knight, this address is several years old," Maria said, her voice cautious. "There's no guarantee he still lives there, but it's a starting point." Gabriel nodded, his heart filled with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Thank you, Maria," he said. This is more than I had." He decided to go to the apartment immediately. He couldn't wait. He needed to find his son, to see him, to talk to him, to begin to build a relationship. He asked Sarah to arrange for a car and driver. He didn't want to draw attention to himself, to arrive in a limousine and overwhelm his son with his wealth and status. He wanted to approach him as a man, as a father, not as a billionaire. As he rode through the city, his mind raced with questions and anxieties. What would Michael be like? Would he be angry, resentful? Would he even believe his story? Would he want anything to do with him? He tried to imagine what Michael might look like, picturing a younger version of himself, perhaps with Anna's eyes, her gentle smile. He felt a surge of paternal love, a longing to connect with this unknown child, to make up for the lost years. The car pulled up in front of a modest, two-story apartment building, its paint peeling, its windows grimy. It was a far cry from Gabriel's luxurious penthouse, a stark reminder of the different worlds they inhabited. Gabriel took a deep breath, steeling himself for whatever lay ahead. He stepped out of the car, his heart pounding in his chest. He walked towards the building, his footsteps echoing on the concrete pavement. He was about to meet his son. Gabriel stood before the apartment door, number 7, his hand raised to knock, but he hesitated. A wave of emotions washed over him. Guilt, grief, fear, and a fierce, overwhelming determination. He had spent the last few hours processing Anna's death, her life story, and the bombshell revelation of his son's existence. Now, facing the reality of meeting Michael, the weight of it all threatened to crush him. He thought of Anna, her quiet strength, her selfless sacrifice. He imagined her living in this modest apartment, working as a janitor, raising their son alone, all while battling the physical and emotional scars of the accident. The guilt gnawed at him. He had lived a life of privilege and success, while she had struggled in obscurity, bearing the burden of their shared past. He grieved for the lost years, the missed milestones, the father-son moments they would never have. He grieved for Anna, for the life she should have had, for the love they could have shared. But amidst the grief and guilt, a powerful determination surged within him. He wouldn't let Anna's sacrifice be in vain. He would find his son. He would connect with him. He would do everything in his power to make amends for the past, to build a future together. He took a deep breath, steeling his resolve, and knocked on the door. He heard movement inside, the shuffling of feet, and then the door opened. A young man stood before him, his eyes questioning, his expression guarded. He was tall and lean, with a mop of dark hair, just like Gabriel's had been at that age. But his eyes were Anna's. The same gentle, intelligent eyes that had captivated Gabriel 30 years ago. Gabriel's heart ached. He was looking at his son, a mirror image of himself and the woman he had loved. "Michael?" Gabriel asked, his voice trembling slightly. The young man nodded, his expression wary. "Yes? Who are you?" Gabriel hesitated, searching for the right words, the right way to explain this impossible situation. "My name is Gabriel Knight," he said, his voice low and earnest. I knew your mother, Anna." Michael's eyes narrowed slightly. He clearly recognized the name. Anna must have spoken about him, perhaps not often, but enough for the name to register. "What do you want?" Michael asked, his voice guarded, a hint of suspicion in his tone. Gabriel took a deep breath. He had to be honest, direct, even if it meant risking rejection. I "I just found out about you, Michael," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Anna, she told me, before she died, that I'm your father." The words hung in the air, heavy and profound. Michael stared at him, his expression a mixture of shock, disbelief, and a flicker of something that might have been anger. The silence stretched, thick and uncomfortable. Gabriel waited, his heart pounding, his future hanging in the balance. He had laid bare his soul, revealed his deepest secret, and now it was up to Michael to decide what to do with it. The silence continued, stretching on for what felt like an eternity to Gabriel. Michael simply stared at him, processing the enormity of the revelation. His expression was unreadable, a blank canvas upon which Gabriel projected his own fears and hopes. Finally, Michael spoke, his voice low and controlled. "You're saying you're my father?" Gabriel nodded, his throat tight with emotion. "Yes, Michael. Anna, she told me just before she passed away. I had no idea. I swear, I had no idea." Michael continued to study him, his gaze intense and unwavering. He was clearly trying to reconcile the image of this wealthy, powerful man with the stories his mother must have told him, with the absent father he had lived with his entire life. How do I know you're telling the truth?" Michael asked, his voice laced with skepticism. Gabriel had anticipated this question. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the tattered photograph, the one Anna had clutched in her dying moments. He handed it to Michael. "This was your mother's," Gabriel said. "She was holding it when I found her." Michael took the photograph, his fingers tracing the faded image. He looked at the young, smiling faces of Gabriel and Anna, a snapshot of a past he had never known. He recognized his mother instantly, her youthful beauty a stark contrast to the gaunt woman he had cared for in her final years. He looked at the young Gabriel, searching for any resemblance, any connection. She never told me much about you," Michael said, his voice softer now, the initial hostility fading. "Just that you were a good man. That you didn't know." "She saved my life, Michael," Gabriel said, his voice filled with emotion. "She pushed me off the train tracks, just seconds before the train hit. She was injured, badly injured, and she never told me about you. She said she didn't want to be a burden." Michael looked down at the photograph, his expression a mixture of sadness and understanding. He finally understood the sacrifices his mother had made, the secrets she had kept, the pain she had endured. She was a good woman," Michael said, his voice thick with emotion. "She did everything for me. Everything." "I know," Gabriel said. "And I want to do everything I can for you, Michael. I wanted to make up for lost time. I want to get to know you." Michael looked up at him, his eyes still cautious, but the skepticism had softened. He was considering the possibility, weighing the potential benefits against the risks of opening himself up to this stranger, this man who claimed to be his father. I don't know what to say," Michael said, his voice hesitant. "This is a lot to take in." "I understand," Gabriel said. "I don't expect you to accept me right away. I want a chance to get to know you, to be a part of your life." Michael hesitated for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Okay," he said. "Okay, we can talk." He stepped back, opening the door wider, inviting Gabriel inside. It was a small gesture, but it was a significant one. It was an opening, a crack in the wall he had built around himself. It was a beginning. Gabriel stepped inside the apartment, his heart filled with a mixture of hope and trepidation. He knew that building a relationship with Michael wouldn't be easy. There would be challenges, awkward moments, and perhaps even resentment. But he was determined to try. He owed it to Anna, and he owed it to his son. He had lost 30 years, but he wasn't going to waste another minute. The initial weeks of Gabriel and Michael's relationship were tentative, marked by a cautious exploration of each other's lives. They met for coffee, for dinner, for walks in the park. They talked slowly and deliberately, sharing stories, piecing together the fragments of their shared history. Michael was reserved, understandably guarded. He had grown up without a father, and the sudden appearance of a wealthy, powerful man claiming that role was understandably overwhelming. He was polite, respectful, but there was a distance, a wall he had erected around himself. Gabriel, in turn, was patient and understanding. He didn't push, he didn't pressure. He knew that trust had to be earned, that a relationship couldn't be built overnight. He focused on listening, on learning about Michael's life, his interests, his dreams. He discovered that Michael was a talented artist, working as a graphic designer for a small advertising agency. He was passionate about his work, but he also struggled with the financial realities of living in a big city. He lived paycheck to paycheck, just as Anna had. Gabriel resisted the urge to shower Michael with gifts, to offer him a lavish lifestyle. He knew that wouldn't build a genuine connection. Instead, he offered practical support. He helped Michael find a better-paying job at a larger, more prestigious firm, using his connections but emphasizing Michael's talent and qualifications. He helped him find a more comfortable apartment, closer to his work. He didn't do these things as a handout, but as an investment in Michael's future, a way to empower him, to give him the opportunities he deserved. He made it clear that he expected Michael to work hard, to earn his success, just as he had. Slowly, gradually, the wall between them began to crumble. Michael started to open up, sharing his hopes and fears, his frustrations and aspirations. He began to see Gabriel not just as a wealthy stranger, but as a man, a father who genuinely cared about him. They started to spend more time together, not just in formal settings, but in casual, everyday moments. They went to baseball games, watched movies, cooked dinner together. They discovered shared interests, a common sense of humor, a growing bond that transcended their vastly different backgrounds. Gabriel learned about Michael's childhood, the challenges he had faced growing up without a father, the sacrifices Anna had made. He listened without judgment, offering support and understanding. He never tried to replace Anna's memory, but to honor it, to acknowledge the profound impact she had had on both their lives. Michael, in turn, learned about Gabriel's life, his successes, his regrets. He saw the genuine remorse in his father's eyes, the deep love he had held for Anna, the longing he had carried for a child he had never known. The healing process was slow, but it was real. The wounds of the past, the years of separation, the pain of loss, began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of connection, a belonging, of family. Gabriel never forgot Anna. He established a foundation in her name, dedicated to supporting single mothers and children with disabilities. He visited her grave regularly, placing flowers and talking to her, sharing his progress with Michael, promising to honor her memory by being the best father he could be. Michael, initially hesitant about the foundation, eventually became involved, using his artistic talents to design its logo and promotional materials. He found a sense of purpose in honoring his mother's legacy and helping others who had faced similar struggles. The story concludes not with a perfect, fairy tale ending, but with a realistic, hopeful one. Gabriel and Michael had built a strong, loving relationship, a father-son bond forged from loss, forgiveness, and a shared commitment to building a better future. They had found peace, not by erasing the past, but by embracing it, by learning from it, and by allowing it to shape them into the men they were meant to be. They had found each other, and in doing so, they had both found a sense of wholeness, a sense of family that had eluded them for far too long. The pain of Anna's absence would always be there, a bittersweet reminder of their journey, but it was now tempered by the enduring power of love, a love that had transcended time and circumstance, a love that had finally brought them together.